Town Halls on Childcare and Cooperatives. I am Tamala Blaylock, Vice President of Cooperative Relations for NCBA CLUSA, and we are so excited to welcome you all to this series. So starting out with quick introductions, today's Town Hall is done in a similar style as we do our Co-op Circle Happy Hour, where it is a community that is joining in on this conversation. We will center the faces of our thought leaders. We encourage you all to share and join in and connect with us. And there are plenty of opportunities to do that during the presentation, as there is a Q&A segment as well, if you are so engrossed that you are a bit shy to engage throughout. Before so today, here are our featured group, and they will be introduced by our speaker. Oh no. Let's see. Oh. Okay. 1 second. I missed our welcome, but the initial welcome that we had, which we'll get to at another time. I wanted to introduce our Co-op Circle Co-op Circle platform, which is our online engagement tool, which allows everyone to connect with each other. It's the only Apex cross-sector online engagement tool that we have. So the link to engage in that will be here. And additionally, we have USA Co-op Stories. So that landing page link will be put there. And that is there, and it's available for us to be able to engage and start sharing stories. So you'll hear a lot more about USA Co-op Stories. It's a really engrossing landing page. It has not only the opportunity to link your story, but also a guide on how to script a short 1 to 2 minute video, different topics for you to consider, different recommendations on how to shoot the video. And you can do a lot of this using our amazing cell phones to do that, and all the different ways that we are planning to amplify a co-op story. So that is another opportunity there. Lastly, which I will put into the text before I hand it over to our moderator, is, and since it's a town hall, so we don't have as much time for introductions, we are inviting you to type your introductions into the chat. So please include your name, where in the world you are, and then also what has intrigued you to join today. So type that into the chat. We will also have a prompt in there for you shortly to remember how to do that. So continue to do that, be engaged through the chat. You are also welcome to raise your hand and ask questions, or to type questions or thoughts or commentary into the chat, because you want this to be a live, kinetic discussion and not like a webinar style, because that is a Co-op Circle way. So with that, I will kick it off and introduce Rob McClinton, CEO of Small World Communications, who will be our moderator for today's session. And he will introduce himself and our other thought leaders on today's Co-op Circle Town Hall on childcare and cooperatives. So Rob, bring it over to you.
Thank you so much, Tamala, and thank you everyone for joining and being part of this. 43 people, that's fantastic. You know, this whole idea was about addressing a need that's so pressing in our society, and it just seems to not be getting addressed. And if there's anything I've learned the time I've spent in the cooperative community over the last 6 or 7 years, is that, you know, cooperatives can get it done when we decide that we're going to work together and leverage the strength of partnership and mutuality. We find solutions. And so this crisis just really needs for a group of us to come together to help solve the problem. And as I started digging into it, I came across some amazing people who have done some amazing work in doing just this for a heck of a lot longer than, you know, I did. I started paying attention to it because literally up to one's homesick with pink eye right now, but 2 small kids in daycare at the same time, paying an arm and a leg, and then really kind of thinking about what would other people do who can't afford this, right? And they're just really jammed up, or and their careers are stuck, and hearing these stories. And so as I started to look around, it just found an amazing group of people who have done so much to address the issue. I thought it made sense to introduce them and introduce their stories to a bunch of folks to help inspire you to look into it, to try to affect that change. So let's start with Lori. I'll let you let everyone introduce yourself, but let's start with Lori Sapo.
Well, thank you, Rob. Yes, my name is Lori Sapo, and I operate a cooperative development center in Mandan, North Dakota. We've been operating here since 1994. So I'm looking forward to visiting with you all today.
Fantastic. And we have, she hears this a lot, so I'm going to say it again because it's kind of standard. When you write a book, people are going to say she literally wrote the book about it. So we from my new home state development center in California, it's Kim Kuntz. Can you introduce yourself, Kim?
Thank you. My name is Kim Kuntz, and I am with the California Center for Cooperative Development.
Thank you so much. And then, once the center is up and running, there's that thing about getting it launched, and then there's keeping it going. And there is an organization that's dedicated to keeping it going. So the process is really kind of covered from start to finish, folks. And the person who's joining us today to talk about that is Diane Rose.
Hi, I'm Diane Rose, and I am in Reston, Virginia right now. I'm the president of Parent Cooperative Preschools International, but I came to that position after a kind of long and winding co-op road, as I think is a pretty common thing. But I, in my day job, am a teacher in a cooperative preschool in Reston, and I'm also the vice president of the Virginia Cooperative Preschool Council. So I try to stay connected kind of at all levels of what's going on in terms of co-op preschools and childcares. So I'm really excited to be able to talk with all of you today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And, there's so much more before we jump into it that I want to share. That's when starting to research how the cooperative community is really helping to address this issue. I've talked to so many people with so many stories. It's really amazing the work that people are doing. There's free software for childcare centers from the cooperators up in Washington. I think Diane from the Northwest CDC told me about that organization. So they make it available to help run your cooperative center. There's another cooperative startup in New York that's working on a software solution. It's just people all over the spectrum that are really trying to help make this happen. And thanks to Principle 6, very willing to work together to help make it happen. So let's start with the story of what's going on in North Dakota with your center there, Lori. And can you tell us about that?
Okay, well, thank you, Rob. I'm just going to start out with a little background on our Co-op Development Center because I believe it represents a solid example of the application of cooperative principle number 6, that concern for our communities. We're a cooperative development center supported by rural electric cooperative dues. Telecommunication cooperatives make donations to our efforts, and then we have a grant through USDA. And about 30 years ago, our cooperatives decided to dedicate a portion of their profits to rural development. And North Dakota had been experiencing rural population decline since the 70s. And we wanted to be a part of that effort to try to stem that decline. And initially, we set out to focus our efforts, our work on efforts that would need more energy, like getting those meters spinning to keep our own businesses viable and to create jobs because, people move to where the jobs are. And while all of that was well and good, what we've learned through the years is that people desire a certain quality of life so they can live comfortably. They need good emergency and healthcare services close by. They need access to healthy foods and schools, and they need childcare services. And this is now where we are currently focused with our work. And so most of our time is spent developing and expanding businesses outside of our cooperative service area. Electric cooperatives typically don't provide electricity to cities. It's that farming area outside of our cities. So it might feel a little counterintuitive, investing your profits in businesses that you don't serve. But remember, those cooperative principles are a part of our business model, and we're dedicated to investing some of our profits to invest or to enrich the lives of our members and the communities where they live. So over the years, our center has helped form Cooperative to support food access, meat plants, grocery stores, and childcare. And they've assisted mutually owned businesses with emergency services, fire protection, theater, or swimming pools, just a whole host of things. And it led us then to our our work in childcare cooperatives. And so on to the topic for today. In my short time with you, I will be sharing some numbers to help you understand the struggles behind operating a childcare center and how in North Dakota we connected cooperatives in a multi-stakeholder childcare cooperative to share in that responsibility of making sure this very important service is available for parents. And so this chart helps illustrate why we need more people involved in supporting childcare. Like in most cases, these sparsely populated states typically experience declines before other areas, and they're easier to notice because of our smaller population base. Childcare struggles have been on our radar for at least 15 years now, and we had more and more in-home operators and for-profit centers stepping out of the business and leaving gaps in our communities. And it was becoming a business model that was having trouble attracting for-profit operators. Our legislature was in session 2 years ago, and a push was on for more funding for childcare. And during this time, it became apparent that it was difficult to articulate why a childcare center couldn't pay a higher wage for workers when tuition was just so high. So to help with that conversation, we developed this pie chart. This chart was developed in 2022 with actual numbers from a childcare we assisted. And so in this chart, we assume a worker salary of $40,000. This is a typical service-based salary in our state. It's a salary for the jobs that we're having trouble filling currently. This chart also shows that tuition for a childcare during this time was $140 per week per child, or $7,280 a year, which represents about 18% of a parent's gross income. And for this example, tuition provides revenue of $1,960 per week from the care of 14 children. Expenses included salary and benefits, utilities, building maintenance, and supplies for $1,911, and food was covered under a government subsidy. So you can see this is very skinny margins, just $49 per week. But on both sides of the equation, there are struggles and difficulties. It's difficult to imagine charging a family a higher tuition. If you have 2 children, it's almost 40% of your gross income for childcare. There's a point where it's no longer worth working because childcare is so high. And it's also difficult to imagine a point where the childcare could provide decent pay raises. So this clearly points out the need for more helping hands. And I can't think of better contributors or partners in this effort than cooperatives. Next slide, please. And now on to our example, the Energy Capital Childcare Cooperative, our multi-stakeholder employer-assisted childcare cooperative located in a North Dakota town with 2,000 people. We started our childcare development work with education. We held a forum to help people learn how a cooperative could be a part of the solution to our need for more childcare capacity, much like this town hall today that NCBA is hosting. We had over 100 people attend the event, another clear signal that we had a problem. And we had community leaders, development professionals, and our members attend. It took about 2 years for the idea to germinate when one of our members reached out. They were experiencing trouble recruiting new employees to work at one of their plants located in a small community and had identified the lack of childcare as a part of that problem. And so it's by chance that this story begins with a cooperative helping to develop a cooperative, but it's an important point. Most times, people that work for cooperatives already understand that value of cooperating and that the benefit isn't always spread evenly. And that can really be a sticking point when attempting to cooperate. This childcare center emerged as a nonprofit 501c3 with bylaws developed to guide the operation as a cooperative. The business members are a bank, a nursing home, a school, a hospital, and energy cooperatives. It was a cooperative that reached out to other businesses in the community and asked them if they were having trouble recruiting employees, if they felt part of that issue was a lack of childcare, and asked them if they'd like to learn together of ways they could collaborate on a solution. Early on, we reached out to Kim because she had this great expertise on developing cooperative childcare centers, and we brought her in virtually to those early planning meetings so she could answer questions from a place of experience. And this was key to help the business leaders understand their roles, to get them engaged, and to alleviate concerns. Next slide, please. We engaged a point person from each business that had the authority to make decisions. This helped us move along faster with both financial decisions and those that decision making in general. We also brought in the local licensor for childcare to be a part of that planning process. We began with employers surveying their employees, and we initially set a goal of caring for 30 children. The results indicated we needed to at least double that. The key employees were instrumental in working out much of those bigger details. For example, it was those decision makers that selected the building, and as a board member of the childcare cooperative, they signed off on a loan to purchase the building. They also worked through who got what. A benefit of organizing the cooperative is that each participating business was allowed a certain number of guaranteed care spots for their employees. They negotiated these numbers among themselves. And the flip side is that they also agreed that with these dedicated spots, they would pay for any of the spots that were assigned to them that were unfilled for a minimum of the initial 3 years of operation. In this case, there was such a need for childcare. There were no spots available from day one. They also decided to keep some of the spots open for the public benefit, which is an important point if you choose to organize as a 501c3. These decision makers also determined how much money was needed for startup and how to meet that need. One business donated legal expertise to file the IRS Form 1023. At the time, that was a $5,000 to $10,000 savings. A number of the businesses provided cash donation for startup costs. Some paid up front a certain amount, some spread it over 3 to 5 years, and some were unable to donate any cash at all, but could donate services such as accounting or food preparation services. They worked with parents to set tuition at a level that could cover their cash flow, but still be affordable for their employees. Next slide, please. And they also decided to empower their employees to help them accomplish tasks. These employees formed working groups that interviewed and hired the director. They raised grants and donations. They put together plans for renovating the building and furnishing it. And they also had one that worked on that initial enrollment of children. And this work was done on the clock. The employers donated their employee time to help move this cooperative forward. Our initial plan was to have the businesses step aside once that childcare was operational and transition to a parent-operated childcare cooperative. However, when the time came to transition, the employers had a desire to stay at the helm, and they did so. And this is because they wanted to be aware of the struggles being encountered by that childcare center in real time. And this is where I like to note that co-ops are flexible and they can be molded to suit your needs. And I encourage people to trust the development process. When launching a project like this, there's no way you're going to know up front all the steps you're going to take or how it's going to end up at the end. You're going to need to let go of your idea enough to let other people add to it so it can become stronger. Next slide, please. So to summarize, just some of the nuggets that encourage cooperation among employers was that there was some benefit to the participating employers. They received those allocated care spots as a recruitment tool to help find the employees they needed. And that 501c3 status allowed for tax deductions for contributions if they needed that. And that the childcare was separately incorporated and operated by a director and its own employees, removing that liability from the businesses. And the cooperative model also gave them that ability to pool their assets among many businesses to launch the childcare. and it helped decrease those operating costs of the center. And that they use those parent committees to help spread the work out among many people. It's exciting to see so many cooperators and businesses interested in childcare. You can make a difference. A cooperative is a way to get what you need to operate your own business, but still remain independent. And so I'm really looking forward to see what emerges from this town hall.
Thank you, Lori. That's a fantastic overview of what you pulled together up there. It's just really amazing, and I love the part about the employers did want to let go at the end, like they just embraced the center, right? And even though it's not
unexpected.
Yeah, that's just wonderful. There's so much cynicism we've had as a society over years, especially about this divide between business doesn't want to embrace these things, and here you have these businesses saying like, no, we don't want to let go. We want to stay involved. If something goes wrong, we want to know about it right away. It's that level of caring is it's really just fantastic to see and hear. Warms the heart a little bit. Okay, a lot of it. I'm not Misty, you're Misty. Okay, Kim, let's talk a little about the childcare cooperatives and your experience and the fantastic work you've done there.
Thanks. I started my career in cooperatives actually with childcare. I applied for a job with the University of California at Davis. They wanted somebody that had childcare experience to work with childcare co-ops in California, and I applied for that job and I got it. I had a lot of experience in children's programs and in childcare, but not so much about co-ops. So I did a great deep dive on co-ops and really settled into my position. Since I started there, of course, I expanded. I work with all different kinds of cooperatives now. But one of the things I did, if you can move to the next slide, while I was at UC Davis, is that I did a study because I knew what goes into a strong, a good childcare program. And so I did a survey. We have over 300 childcare co-ops throughout the state of California. And I surveyed them, asking them about some of their practices and so forth, and found that the programs were very, very high quality. All the things that we look for and what makes a good program in childcare came out very strong on the survey. So what we found is that most of the people who got into childcare co-ops started them because it was a good price and they liked the program. They'd heard about it from other people, but they stayed in them and they had their other children, if they had multiple children, because they liked the program. And that parent involvement is really strongly linked to positive outcomes for kids. Parents also learn to be better parents just by working in the program, by volunteering, even when they're not directly in the classroom. They also form these positive relationships between the caregivers and the parents. And what happens is that enriches the experience that the employees of the child care center have, so they stay there longer. Because one of the biggest problems in child care centers throughout the US is a turnover of staff, so that a child entering a program many times will not have the same main caregiver in the middle of the year or at the end of the year. We found that is not a problem in the childcare co-ops because they have this relationship with the parents and they're very, very valued and feel that they're valued. So that leads to a very, very low caregiver turnover rate, especially when you compare it to what the statistics are today. So if we go on, I also had a lot of questions from the programs that I had, repeated questions. And so I thought, well, what I really want to do is write a book about this to try to address all these concerns. So we can advocate for childcare co-ops because they're a good program. We want to tell people how they can start them and help to address the questions that I kept getting repeatedly from programs. So I wrote this book about 20 years ago. It's not a page turner because it's just kind of divided into a lot of different kinds of issues. So hopefully it's still relevant today. And then just a few years ago, I worked with a couple of other partners to do these landscape reports. And one of them that we did was on childcare. So this other publication it says California Cooperatives, Today's Landscape of Childcare Co-ops, but it really is an overview of childcare co-ops and is very relevant to other states as well. If you could go to the next slide. So really, let's look at this backdrop that we all know. There's a crisis throughout the country in childcare. We don't even have enough spaces. We need childcare programs. The affordability is a huge issue. These prices that I have on this slide are the median within the low group and the high group. They're not the highest and the lowest. So I can tell you in California that we are on the higher side of these medians. And of course, what you can see is that infant care is the highest cost. And then it goes down as kids get older. There's also inadequate support for low-income parents. Really, this affordability and the lack of programs that would serve low-income people make it to where many times they just can't afford childcare. They have to bring their kids, leave them in the car, all kinds of things that are not desirable for anyone. Can you go to the next slide? We also have on the other side a worker issue, which is that people in childcare, one of the big reasons for the turnover is that not only working conditions, but the pay is very, very low. If you look at the profile, they're mostly women of color, and mostly moms. The pay and the benefits are really sad. This is among the lowest paid wage earners in the state. For teachers, which they have to have a degree and so forth to be a teacher, it's about $18 an hour. And for a childcare assistant, it's about $14 an hour. There's also a racial wage gap here, so it's not the same for everyone. If we look at the overview, it's also very sad. 15% live below the poverty line. Those are our childcare workers. Those are people that are caring for our children. 37%, it's even worse. They're way below the poverty line. So this is a really fragile workforce. And that challenge it's not only challenging for those people in the jobs, but it's a challenge for everybody because it exacerbates the problem with in the industry and for parents. And you can see it's a 26 to 40% annual childcare turnover rate in the state. What I found when I did my survey was that for the childcare programs, it's only about 10%, 10 to 15. So we can go to the next slide, please. So I just want to do a backdrop, and Lori kind of alluded to this in her presentation, is that the economics of childcare are tough. There are regulations that are really good. And when I first started out in childcare, we were advocating for better regulations, and we got them, but they also make it expensive to operate because there are, if you think about it, do you want your child, your preschool or your infant, to be one of 20 kids to a caregiver? Of course you don't. So we have to have those regulations that keep it safe for our children. They also make it more expensive. One of the most significant here is this child to adult ratio. It varies by the age of the child, and that's why the infant is more expensive. In most states, it's a 3 children per caregiver, and they go according to age. And so you have this kind of balancing act with the economics, which is that parents can only afford to pay so much, and it costs a lot to run a childcare center. So what happens? How do we get that balancing act? Many times it's on the backs of the workers, which is okay. We can't pay them very much, so that's how we balance this tough issue. So and of course that further exacerbates the problems. If we could go to the next slide. So we need to be creative. You know, are there some other ways besides just paying people poorly? And what I've been doing is just kind of looking at how can we make this work. And I think that one of them is by forming cooperatives so that everybody becomes a part of this and it becomes a part of the problem solving. So there's membership types in childcare co-ops. Most of the programs in the past have been parents. Parents own and control the program. They are the members. There have been a few worker co-ops. However, there are some challenges with worker co-ops in this sphere, and the employer model like Lori was sharing about. But I think what I would like to advocate for is more of this multi-stakeholder. Let's all work together to address the issues of each group and also the need to expand childcare and make it affordable while not sacrificing quality. We can go to the next slide. So one of the ways that we make it affordable is we look for a structure that works. Now, many times, of course, many states have statutes that allow us to have a particular statute for cooperatives. And to be honest, the best way that we need to incorporate these is by being a 501c3 nonprofit. And I'm going to have another slide about that and how that works. But, you know, the membership means democratic governance. And the board of directors in the Child Care Center, just like in other co-ops, is setting the policies. And then they're hiring a board, and the board oversees the co-op child care executive director. This, of course, would change a little bit depending on who the membership is. And then the director implements those policies, manages operations, and then hires and supervisors the teachers and the aides. So this next slide is just talking about the charitable status and why nonprofit is really good. The IRS defines childcare as education, and so it is really easy to get approved as a 501c3 nonprofit. Most childcare co-ops can really qualify very easy for this exemption. And I'll tell you, when you start doing the business plans and the feasibility studies, not paying taxes is a way to save money, and it's crucial to making this work. So not only is it tax exempt, you can get some grants that can help with the program at startup in particular, but you can also do some creative things as the center is operating. And you can also accept tax deductible donations. Members still govern the project just like any other cooperative democratically. The issue with a worker co-op is easily solved. You can maintain that nonprofit status by having this multi-stakeholder co-op. Now, the 501c3 status says that you cannot have a majority of people with a financial interest. And of course, if you had just a worker cooperative, that makes it difficult. Some of the worker cooperatives have done some very, very creative ways to maintain the 501c3 status. But one of the ways you can do that is by having a multi-stakeholder. If you have parents involved, if you have employers involved, the majority is not the workers, but workers still have an equal voice with everyone else. And so I think the multi-stakeholder is really a really good model to look at. And my last slide is coming. So why do a child care co-op? Because you can create a program that best fits the members, employers, parents, the child care worker. You can reduce costs while maintaining that quality. Remember, the caregiver attributes that make a quality program are the education that they have, their experience, their credentials. We want to keep them around. The ratio of the child to the number of children per caregiver, and that it's developmentally appropriate. And what we really want is a stable, reliable child care for our kids. And by addressing some of these other issues, we get that. And the most important thing is these programs are good for children. Pass it on now.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Kim. That's a wonderful overview. You know, there's so much there. One of the things that you talked about was the economics and making the numbers work. And when doing some of the research around this, there was a CNBC report where they talked about, like, why is childcare so expensive? And they laid out, because of that ratio, as you were talking about, which is 3 children to 1 caregiver. On the infant side, especially non-mobile, like my boys both started in their daycare when they were non-mobile, and they're about to graduate. I'm not sure when we started graduating kindergarten, but they're graduating kindergarten next week. It's a thing now. You know, the folks who took care of them, you know, there's always one for each of them. They had one particular teacher who they would just stop crying for, who they'd always go to, and they're going to be there for their graduation, right? And so they don't remember them, but, you know, we're misty when we when we're seeing it happen. But the math, like, we kept them there through kindergarten because that actually helped the school, and the school meant so much to us that the school makes margin in the kindergarten level, more margin at the kindergarten level, at least this one does, than they do at the infant level. And so tacking on that kindergarten level thing was important for the school to be able to make the numbers pencil out. So if that's what you're saying to me, that's something when folks are thinking about what age range to cover, at least in California, going to kindergarten might financially help make some of this make sense. Plus, they get the benefit of staying in the same place through one more year. But you know, they're doing division and multiplication at 6 years old. My mind is blown. So, okay, I'll stop rambling. Diane, let's talk about what happens. You've done all the work. You've followed all the models that you've had so far from Lori and Kim. You've got this thing. Now who's going to run it? Like, how does it keep going?
I think one of the coolest things about co-op preschools and co-op childcare is that each one is so unique. I have visited schools all over the country now, and just each one is tailored to support the community that designed it, that developed it. And so they're all a little bit different, but the reason that PCPI, or Parent Cooperative Preschools International, exists is to help us leverage all the learning that comes from developing all of those unique co-ops and borrow ideas from one another and stay connected. And so I think that's one of the most important things that we do, that we are happy to help people set up and get launched in a co-op. But our real strength is the networking and connections that come once the co-op is in existence. So the first co-op preschool was started in 1916 at the University of Chicago, and it no longer exists, but there are several that have been in operation since 1924, because that makes them 100 now. So if you're going to have an organization that gets to be 100 years old, it's got something going for it. And most likely what it is that someone a long time ago was really thinking about, how can we, because it's always a group of people that gets these things started, how can we set up a structure that will go beyond our years here? Because co-ops, the people who create them, they don't stay. And that's just the part of the way it works. They get passed on year after year to person after person. And it's just like a little gem or a little gift that gets handed off. And there has to be a really strong foundation that has been set in place that allows that to happen and allows that organization to just keep growing and changing with the times. I was nodding my head a lot, both when Kim and Lori were talking, because there were so many things that you said that I was like, yeah, that's right, that's true. So some of the things that PCPI is doing to make this happen, we really exist for to encourage family involvement, to encourage play-based learning, making sure that parents are being educated while they're there. It's not just childcare, but it's about the whole community learning and becoming better and being there for one another, and then building community connections. So connecting with other organizations that are out there that support your work. But I can tell you that through my own experience, I've been teaching, talking about longevity in co-ops. I've been teaching there for 18 years, but before that, I was a parent in my co-op for 4 years, and I served on the board all 4 of those years. And so I've looked at the way co-ops work from a lot of different lenses. I've seen how it was extremely helpful for me as I was just learning how to be a parent, but it also taught me how to be an advocate for my child as they were going through the school system beyond preschool, which is, preschool's always happy, so you don't have to do so much advocating there. And all of my peers and the parents who have come to the school after me, who are now my employers, I see them as leaders in the community. They don't just go away. Everyone builds a connection year after year, and I've just watched them grow and flourish, and our community really relies on those people. And so there's more than just childcare coming out of this. Community connections are extraordinarily important and powerful. But some of the things that PCPI is doing so that we can help co-ops form and exist and carry on over years is we provide training. We just this year have launched some board service training, because when you have a group of people coming together to create something, they haven't necessarily had the experience of serving on a board before. And so we're trying to make it possible for everyone to have build a little bit of background knowledge before they step in and become the treasurer or the president of their board and wonder, what am I going to do now? So we try to make it a little more comfortable. We also provide or put together forums, which is really focused topics where people can come together and talk. We might have a subject matter expert who comes in and speaks a little bit and then facilitates the discussion, much like our town hall we're doing today. But we can talk about issues like specific to treasurers, or one we're doing sometime soon is fundraising success stories. And it's just a chance for people in different situations to come together and share their experiences, really. And then we all can borrow and build our own things that are going on in our schools. We feel like communication is really important. And so we try to help schools and people in schools get connected. We have a newsletter that goes out once a month, and it has all kinds of information about current happenings in co-ops all across North America, really. We have Google groups so that members can stay in touch with one another. We do some social media stuff, but I'll tell you that's harder than one would think. But we also have sponsors and partners that we work with. Rob mentioned Jovial. I don't think you said it by name, but that's a software that was developed by a co-op family who wanted to make it easier for co-op schools to manage what's happening in the school and do handovers from year to year. So he developed this software, and it's free to co-ops anywhere. We also work with a group called Resources for Parents, and they do parent training. We work with a group called Wild Med that does CPR and first aid certification, but you can do it online. So it's really very accessible and easy for parents to get a hold of, easy for staff too. And it's a really fantastic training. And we're also working on, we have some what we call councils. So those are sort of regional connected smaller groups. Like there's a Virginia council and there's a California council. That one's not small. California, big, lots of co-ops in California. But we're trying to help schools develop more regional connections. No, it doesn't advance. I'm just talking. And then the last thing is, we have a website that has a directory of all of the schools that are members within our organization, but also we'll be adding just all of the co-op schools that are out there in the world, whether or not they're PCPI members. We offer grants to help co-ops that may need some extra support due to an emergent thing, like a tree fell on a school last year and they needed some extra funds to be able to recover from that. But we also do a co-op spirit grant annually, so that a school that has an idea for a project that will help bring the community together can apply for that and hopefully get funds. And so there's a lot going on within PCPI that's really out there to help schools.
That's fantastic. There really is. I didn't know about the regional councils part. And I think that, sometimes I think I know before I became a parent, I heard things about parent support, and I wouldn't really think too much about it. Or you wondered, like, well, what kind of parents need support? Or like what is that? Because you're naive, you don't have kids yourself, right? But I know that with you and Kim talked about parent support and parent training. And so I went to the foster system. So my eldest son is adopted. And I have to tell you that, everyone should go through a class, like going through classes as to, how to be a parent. This, of all the jobs in the world, there should be a manual for this, right? Or required classes. And just the things that you learn and the connections that you build with other people who are going through this process with you is invaluable, because it is not easy being a parent, and you often feel isolated, right? Because you don't want to say things like, oh, I got frustrated over this thing, because you don't want to admit that, but they got frustrated over it last week, right? So having these programs with the support for the parents as parents is a fantastic add-on to all of these projects. So thank you so much. And the community infrastructure part, as we've been talking about this with all of you, this notion of not focusing on profit margin. Like, this is not about turning a profit. This is about caring for our kids. And from that, there are benefits to businesses. They're able to attract talent. People are able to go to work because they have childcare. So there are these economic things that come out of it. But if we stop focusing on it as a source of profit, we wind up creating a better system. It's almost like community infrastructure in a way, right? Like, everybody needs it. Every business needs it. Almost everyone needs it to some degree. We just need to stop worrying about it being specifically profitable. And all of you have done such wonderful things across your organizations. So let's take a quick look in chat to see if there are any questions floating out there. Tamara, I don't see a Q&A section.
Well, if we were betting, like if this was on sports bets, as I said during the prep meeting, that we might have an audience that's just so captivated. We haven't had as many questions, so we are encouraging, you're welcome to raise your hand or type them in. But looking through what people have typed in the chat, I have seen that one of our attendees, Crystal Davis, says that she and a team are in the midst of creating a birth workers co-op, and they wanted to attend and see how this works hand in hand. So Crystal, if you have anything additional to share, please raise your hand or type that in. Then we all have Margaret Bow, who apparently is just a huge fan of both Lori and Kim. So Margaret's here, yes. Another person that would be very cool to see if they would like to share, Leslie Borrell, worked that they're in New York, and they're founder of Carefully, which is also working in support of the childcare co-op space as well. So we have a hand raise. Crystal Davis. So let's invite Crystal Davis. There you go. Please, Crystal, floor is yours.
Hi. Hello, everyone. So last year we got incorporated as the Southern Bee Alliance. Bee is birthing, and entrepreneurship and empowerment. I don't know why I can't talk today. And so originally the thought was to support birth workers in our community, because we all know how important it is to have birth workers for BIPOC families right now, considering the Black maternal health crisis. But two other co-founders who are heavily involved in early education wanted to initiate a childcare co-op. So what they've been doing, we've provided service recently, and what they've been doing is getting a team of our collective members of the B Collective to offer childcare service. Recently, in Beaufort, South Carolina, they have this big convention, and they were needing some childcare support, and so they did that. So it was kind of like a mobile thing. And then they're looking to do the same thing later on in the fall when the same organization has another convention, I guess is what it's called. So my question is, does that make sense to do it that way, where we just have a group of us going to facilities and providing childcare and allowing those parents to become members and always have that service when they have I guess allowing that business to be a partner of the co-op and provide services as they need it? Or should we be looking at sites like brick and mortar site to have the childcare cooperative? Because what we're thinking is having the Southern Bee Alliance with birth workers, and then the childcare co-op under the same governance, I guess, if that makes sense. But just deciding how to move forward with that because we're kind of working on them simultaneously because it's a need in our area, Charleston, South Carolina. It's because we have a lot of maternity healthcare deserts, but we also have childcare deserts too, or we have a lot of childcare centers who are like on the rating scale or like C's and need that additional support, but parents are working. So birth workers need childcare when they have to go attend births or postpartum visits. And then we have just parents in general in the area who are needing quality childcare.
Right.
So just trying to figure out how to have that marriage between the two and
so
do what we need to do in this area.
Absolutely. So probably going to be a little bit more of a complicated answer. From a high level, from a structure perspective of how to weave these two together, I think I'd probably punt to Kim as probably the person who might have the best idea of the structure on it. But this is going to be super high level because you've got a little bit of a complicated structure there.
Yeah, I think that what you'll need to look at is the licensing requirements, because sometimes what you want to do won't be allowed. But I think the flexibility, I mean, there are a lot of different ways to organize it, and especially because you have a pretty diverse audience, there could be some ways, and I can think of some, but I think it'll take too much time right now, and I'm happy to talk to you if you want to talk later. But I think the first thing to do is to look and see what those licensing requirements are.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and I'd be happy to connect and get everyone else on my team connected as well.
All right. Well, thank you, Crystal. And next up, we have Matthew Epperson.
Okay. Thanks so much, y'all. So, Lori, I've always loved this example and always wanted to ask this question. So, as we know, in our ECA national network, 46% of the landmass of the United States, so much potential for more electric co-ops to engage in this way. Have you seen interest in the network for more uptake of like more electric co-ops kind of following suit? And if you could help me convince folks in Georgia, please, I'd love to work with you.
Oh, thanks for that question. I have had several virtual calls with electric co-ops over the years. I don't know of one that is actually engaged in the development process itself, but you're right. I mean, for any cooperative to be the leader to develop a cooperative, there's just such power in that because, like I said, they're the ones that know how to have that conversation with like-minded businesses. Our co-ops tend to meet communities where they're at, so we'll participate in any way. So if it's not a childcare cooperative, we're helping them get USDA zero interest loans, or we have our own revolving loan fund, or we're grant writing for them, whatever we can to make sure that our communities have childcare. But I don't know. I have not engaged in a replication of this one.
Well, maybe we could figure it out.
Maybe.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. I also have a recommendation for you in the chat. And then next, we are going to welcome Lori.
Leslie.
I'm sorry, Leslie. Leslie. My apologies, Leslie.
Hey, Leslie.
Hi, and I have spoken to Rob before, so nice to see you. And I'm happy to be here. I mean, I thought I would just share a little bit, and I think following on Matthew's question, hi Matthew, is so carefully as I mentioned, we're a platform cooperative that supports community-based childcare. So a little bit broader than just the childcare co-ops that we've been focused on today. We really started, and we've been focused on sort of informal care in terms of like babysitting co-ops and swaps. And we're just now starting to pilot with licensed childcare, which is inclusive of childcare co-ops. But I think that there's a real need for this kind of infrastructure for co-ops, because a lot of the people that we talk to, I mean, even for us, just setting up the co-op is challenging. And as you've talked about, every co-op is different. And so understanding how you can create that like shared services or infrastructure layer is really what we think about too, is how do we bring people together that have this shared mindset? And so I'm really interested in kind of connecting with people who want to kind of connect and empower all of the people with like-minded ideas so that we can kind of continue to figure out what are the common pieces that we can build out and make it easier for people to create co-ops, and then they can focus on the work of taking care of the kids, and we can focus on some of the parts that are the infrastructure and the technology, but then grow a bigger network so that we can also drive things forward, like policy and advocacy and other things that are important too. So I think how we do that is sort of the conversation and the question, because there's a lot of great work being done by organizations like yourself. So if you have any ideas, or anybody wants to join carefully and think about it, like we talk about, networks for doulas and as well, and birth workers is a great way to kind of use the network, but also just kind of coming on and doing different types of care. So I'm always happy to connect with people and talk more about it.
Yeah, I think we're going to, after this, we're going to have a follow-up for folks who want to take the next step in figuring out what they want to do. And so we make sure that you're a part of that so that you can be along there with them, because we're not just doing this just for informational purposes. We actually want people to take the next step in figuring out if doing this is something that your organization, your community can do. Like, we want to make it happen. So we have a little bit of time left, and Rebecca's hand is up.
Thanks. Thanks all for what you shared. It's really inspiring and nice to hear that things can work themselves out. So I live in the Upper Valley region of Vermont and New Hampshire. I work for the Hanover Co-op food stores, and we have a shortage of childcare, just like a lot of other areas in the country. I've been working with some of the other big businesses in the area, and there's like an inclination to admire the problem rather than do anything, or to like take steps toward it.
Rebecca, we lost your sound.
Okay, am I here?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So I think what I've identified from, like, there's a hesitation from businesses in the area to come together, because it's not that there isn't any childcare, right? And these businesses may already have had various kinds of partnerships or alliances with existing childcare centers that are still open or struggling or whatever. So I'm wondering if you have if anybody has insight into what the conversation might look like with ECE providers, and talking about incorporating them or like folding them into a cooperative model, maybe. I'm also thinking about, like, of course, we need more childcare, but I want to, approach the industry or enter in the least harmful way possible as well. I think there is like a palpable tension here about, oh, well, so a town here, Lebanon, is opening their own kind of public-private partnership childcare. And the sentiment from the childcare centers is very much like, oh, well, you're just going to poach all of our teachers and pay them $2 an hour more. And so I just don't know how to, I think you're hearing what I'm getting at. I'm wondering if anybody has any insight or resources.
I see a lot of head nodding for everybody. So,
yeah. I mean, just to say, one of the things that I would say is you really need to reassure the existing childcare providers that this is not about taking their job. It's about trying to make more opportunities for everybody. So I think what you're noticing is something that happens.
And we actually included them in the conversation and opened opportunities to them as well. Yeah, and if you're doing your demographic collection, you'll know whether or not you have room for new childcare providers. And in most cases, there's just such a demand over the existing supply that you can show to them that it's not a threat. We actually had stories coming out of North Dakota where parents were creating lists of who got to have the next child, because they needed to keep their work and there were no care spots available. So talk about affecting population decline and workforce at the same time.
And getting super personal with your neighbors, like that's at a
A little stress associated with that, yeah.
wow. I'm not sure how you actually make that happen when you're that stressed. So I love that idea of inviting the existing childcare center to the table to be a part of the discussion. That is cooperative nature 101. That is a huge difference between competitive capitalism, right? Like they would never invite the competitor to the table to figure it all out. In some cases they couldn't, that could be considered, but you know what I mean? It's what a fantastic way of approaching the problem. And I think even with all the services that everyone offers, including PCPI, like this existing center may not know that here's an organization that you could lean on, right, to help make your center run better so that everyone wins across the board. So great idea. All right, Tamala, I think we're at that time. What should the good people do if they want to take the next step to engage with our various members of our panels about helping the kids live?
Well, thank you so much for that. I think us being at time, actually slightly over time, it's a great opportunity, as Rob had introduced, that we are going to have a part 2. So after today, when we have our follow-up email, which will include the materials and also the opportunity to engage with this content on Co-op Circle and on our YouTube page, there will be a form that we are going to ask people to submit for essentially what you're seeking for a part 2. So, because we have launched the conversation, that it will be a long ongoing conversation. Today, we wanted to focus on the high level, but in the interim, we want to make sure that you had access to the contact information for this wonderful group of people. And we thank you all so much for this, and we're looking for the conversations to come, but there will be plenty of resources both in the form and also in Co-op Circle for you to continue on this conversation, and then also for these wonderful thought leaders to be aware of that and see what is the best phase 2, part 2 that we have to this wonderful time. So thank you all. So yes, you'll get copies of these slides, you will get contact information and all of the resources here within a week for sure. Also, we're recording and posting this. We talked about co-op stories in that the next Co-op Circle event will be Friday, July 12th from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern because the first weekend in July is the holiday. That's generally the focus that everyone has during that, but we want to thank you all so much. Thank you, Rob, for reaching out and asking for this idea. So for everyone who's attending or watching on YouTube, you are welcome to propose an idea and we will work together to bring it to fruition. Thank you, Lori, Diane, and Kim for saying yes and joining this and sharing this wonderful thought leadership with everyone, which is clearly a topic where there is so much rich interest and already a lot of activity. You want to see that activity expand. So thank you so much for sharing your success stories, the support that you have.